So, just like we all expected, the NFL was forcing teams to make Geno Smith be their backup because he was just too good. He finished seventh in expected points added and seventh in success rate, which suggests that he was not only effective deep downfield, he was effective on every single play. And really, I could not have been much more surprised. I think we all expected the Seahawks to just completely fall apart when they traded Russell Wilson away, but as it turns out, they actually improved at the quarterback position, which is honestly pretty hilarious. As was the case with Russell being their quarterback, though, the offensive line is not doing the quarterback any favors because they ranked 20th in pass blocking and 18th in run blocking, according to PFF grades. So the offensive line wasn't helping at all. And really, I expect that to change with time, though, because Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas is a very promising young tackle duo that's already pretty good, and that's only after 1 year of playing together. Right now, they both have a little bit of room to grow in a literal sense because they're both 315 pounds, which is a little bit on the lighter side. They could both stand to gain maybe 10 more pounds and really solidify themselves as being good pass protectors and a little bit more physical in the run game. But they didn't struggle incredibly so with power, even at the weights that they're in. And they do have a ton of athleticism because they are just a little bit on the lighter side and are good athletes in general. So they have that going for them. They are both really good pass protectors as well, and they can move super nicely in the run game. So there really is a lot to like in that duo. Damian Lewis is a good anchor for the interior. He kind of counteracts a little bit of the lightness on the tackles because Lewis is 332 pounds. He's a solid player. Gabe Jackson missed about half of last year, so Phil Haynes is a worse player, but he actually may be an upgrade because he should be healthy for them this year, as Jackson was just not. Evan Brown is also an upgrade over Austin Blythe, so that's the case even with him being a little bit worse as a pass protector because Blythe was pretty solid in that regard, but Brown is just a better player holistically. And in general, they don't really have any depth on the offensive line. It's pretty much their 5 starters, and that's it. So if they have an injury, they're going to be screwed. So I'm hoping that they'll be healthy, especially this year. Enough of the boring stuff, though. Let's get to their weapons, which is really exciting because DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are a top 5 to 7 wide receiver duo in the NFL. And then they're supercharged by the fact that they drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is a really nice addition in the slot. He was the 11th ranked player on the consensus draft board, and he went 20th overall, so there was really good value with him. And he actually quietly fills a need for the Seahawks because with DK and Lockett being so great, you could be a little bit too casual and think that's all you need. But in the modern era, enough weapons do not exist. You can always get more, and that's really kind of their mindset with it. And I think that's the correct way to look at it. DK and Lockett were both top 61 in yards per reception, so they both can get deep downfield, which is really not a strength of Jackson Smith-Njigba. He can do that to some extent, but I'd say that's really not what his skill set is. But they all have different skill sets beyond even just their deep downfield capacities because DK is going to do a lot of his work just by being a physical freak. Lockett is a savvy route runner that still has some juice in his legs. And then JSN is all refinement. So they all play off each other and they all cover different parts of the field. So it is a very seamless fit with their receivers, which is really what you want to see in addition to just the talent being great. Then, as far as the tight end position goes, it's really a toss-up. They have 3 guys that are vying for snaps. Will Disley and Noah Fant are not too much of deep downfield threats, which is a bit surprising because Fant is really athletic. He's not really much of a deep downfield guy, though. And with Lockett and DK, they don't really need to be too much of anything because they're going to supply the deep downfield stuff on their own. One interesting part, though, is Colby Parkinson, as he averaged 13 yards per reception, which is really good, but that was in limited play, so it's debatable if it's going to be something or not. As far as the running back position goes, they are set there as well. Kenneth Walker is a high-end running back, and they sort of made a luxury pick with Zach Charbonnet, who is a really nice number 2, but it is debatable as if he was worth another second-round pick on the running back position or not, because Walker really can be a bell cow. He can be one of the top runners in the league, and most teams are going to be just fine with one really good running back and then sort of whoever backing them up, but not the Seahawks. They're getting as many weapons as they can, which again, there is some validity to it. It's just more so a question of, do you really need 2 running backs versus you do definitely need 3 legit wide receivers today. So in all, though, they have really good weapons and they have depth there as well now, which is what you want to see. If there's an injury, they're going to be still fine. So there's basically no way to slow down this offense unless you can really get pressure in quickly. And speaking of having depth and talent, the Seahawks might actually have that with the defensive back room now as well, because they probably have the best safety trio in the entire league with Quandre Diggs, Julian Love, and Jamal Adams. They all ranked as above average or at least average according to PFF grades, and they all play really nicely off each other. Adams is great as a blitzer and in the box. Diggs is a good deep downfield safety, and Love can do a little bit of both. He's a hybrid safety, which is something that has become more and more valuable as the league has gotten into attacking the short middle part of the field. So that's something that is really nice to have. They can all play off each other and they can all play at a very high level. The only thing is, the corner room is a bit more of a question mark, which ideally you would have your corners set and then have more question marks for the safeties. They have the inverse. Their safeties are set, and they have some questions at corner. They have Woolen, who was, as a rookie, ranked 34th out of 118 corners, according to PFF grade. So he was truly exceptional, and he has the athletic profile of an elite corner for sure. He is about as athletic as anybody in the entire league. He can run with anybody, and he is also 6'4". So he is a legit weapon for them as a defender, which is not a phrase you hear often, but he is incredibly talented. Then they drafted Vaughn Witherspoon as a top 5 pick, who he was worthy of it. He is super refined as a man corner, and he had some of the best tape you'll ever see for Illinois this past year. He is likely not going to be as dominant as he was as a college player, though, in the pros, at least starting out, because corner is a position that traditionally will have a little bit of a learning curve associated with it. So he may take a little bit to hit the ground running. He also had to deal with an injury from training camp. So that has slowed him down a little bit more as well. But they're really going to need him to be good. And they're going to need him to be good in a flash, because their celebrity players have not been good. And those players are Michael Jackson and Kobe Bryant. So it's really going to be on Witherspoon and Woolen for the success of their corners, which, if you have 2 good corners, that's a lot better than just having one, because you're going to just get picked apart for days if there's 2 weaknesses. If there's one, yeah, there's going to be attacked more continually than you would like, but that's going to be a lot more minimized. So if Witherspoon can hit the ground running, the Seahawks are going to be so much better for it, because they just really don't have too many corners. And yes, they'll be able to play big nickel a lot, which will get all 3 of their great safeties in, but they're going to need some good corners in addition to that. And that sort of remains up in the air if they're going to have that or not. As far as their defensive line is concerned, they have Uchenna Nwosu and Jaron Reed, and then they have very one-dimensional players beyond them. Nwosu was 16th in pressures and is a very solid run defender, even though he's a bit undersized. Reed is fine in both regards. He really wasn't elite as a pressure getter or as a run defender, but he's solid in both regards. And then, as I was saying, with it being one-dimensional, Draymond Jones was 44th in pressures with 4 games missed, so he can really get after the passer. But he's a very poor run defender as an interior player, which is not what you want to see. They also have Boye Mafe, who can defend the run as a big edge, but he hasn't had success so far in his career as a pass rusher, so that remains to be seen if he's going to improve in that regard or not. Darrell Taylor is the opposite of Mafe. He's a really good third down pass rusher, but he can struggle to defend the run at any capacity. Round out their defensive line as well, they have Derek Hall, who is a highly drafted second rounder, and Mario Edwards Jr. can defend the run as an oversized edge or as an undersized defensive tackle. So they have some depth there, but they are really going to need their good players to contribute because it's really question marks after their first wave or so of players, and anybody after that is going to be a question mark. As for their linebacker ranks, they have some strength there as well because Bobby Wagner was PFF's linebacker 1, which is a bit out there. I would say most people would have Fred Warner as their best linebacker in the NFL, but there is something to be said about PFF having him that highly ranked. He remains able to cover deep downfield, and even better in the short game where he really can just display his awareness, and he still has good short burst of speed. I don't think he has the same long speed he once had, but he's still very aware, and he can hit like a Mack truck, so he is going to be difficult to complete passes on in the shallow part of the field. He may have a little more success deep down the field if he's the person covering, but he can do that still with some proficiency as well. And like I said, he can really defend in the run game because he's still such a great tackler that his pursuit hasn't fallen off any, and he just, as soon as he gets his hands on you, the play is done. So that is a real strength for them. And then they have some good secondary and tertiary linebackers as well. Jordan Brooks is a heat-seeking missile as a run defender. He hasn't really shown much as a coverage player, which is disappointing because he is super athletic, but maybe that's something that Wagner will help him refine in and improve in. And speaking of needing to refine in their play, Devin Bush is the same way. He is a super athlete that is a very solid depth piece. He struggled in his past few years with Pittsburgh, and he was let go, I would say, for good reason, but he is a nice option as a third linebacker because even if Pete Carroll wants to run linebackers on the field every play, you're ideally going to have two linebackers on the field most times. So Bush is not going to be out there and get targeted as much because he was a bit of a liability in coverage, but more so as a run defender in Pittsburgh. And he does have a really good strength, though, that he's a really solid pass rusher, which is nice to have a third linebacker with a clear identity like that. He's not the worst coverage player because he is a very good athlete and he has some awareness to him, but that's not really a strength of his either necessarily. So in all, I have the Seahawks as a clearly deserving of a playoff spot team because they just have a lot of boxes checked, and they first and foremost have an exciting quarterback that, if he can repeat his performance from last year, is truly going to have himself in the ranks of the elite quarterbacks, which very few teams can actually say they have an elite quarterback. So it's not a guarantee. It's a 1-year sample size for Geno being as good as he was this past season, but I would say that's the most relevant information we have on him, so it's fair to bank on him being pretty legit again this upcoming season. And for the Seahawks as a whole, they are very dangerous offensively. They have a ton of weapons. It's, again, just going to be how does their lines hold up? Because they're not really good on the offensive side of the ball in that regard, and their defensive line is definitely teetering on being a real weakness. It's not going to be good as far as defending the run, and it's not going to be great at getting after the passer either. So they do have some real issues, but their talent is hard to deny.